Thanks, Amy. Stephanie, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good. Scott, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Great, thank you. We're going to wait a minute or two here to see if we get some other people coming in. All right, we'll go on now, and if other people jump in, we'll go back a little bit if they need to. I don't want to keep you guys waiting here. Oop, wait a minute. We have to find the share here. Hang on just a minute. I'm in the wrong place. There we go. Okay, everybody can see that. Okay. So what we're going to do today is go down to dates and deadlines. And this is probably the harder portion of your contract that the agents all seem to struggle with. And it's not only you, it's everybody that does that. So our first one that we have is time of date and deadline. That means all your deadlines have to be on by a certain time. If you leave it at blank, then you have to go down to paragraph 3.3.3. Oops, wrong one. Sorry. Deadline, time of deadline is 3.3.1. It'll go to 11:59. I suggest strongly that you don't do that. I would put it somewhere between 6 to 9 as your deadlines. That way you are going to get things in a timely fashion and before midnight of any given day. Alternative earnest money deadline is the date that your buyers have to take the earnest money to either an agency or title company. And you can do it or they can do it. Either one works fine, but be sure you get a receipt for it and that you upload that receipt into Command. Next one is title. Now, the first deadline is the title record deadline and tax certificate. This is the responsibility of the listing agent. So they have to get you that, the title work and the tax certificate on this date. But you make this about I would say a week and a half to 2 weeks out after your acceptance date. Then you have about 3 to 4 days after that for your client to review the title and object if there's any objections. The same thing with your off-record title. That's the responsibility of the buyer. Is there anything around that property that needs to go and check and see if it's relative? They don't like the planes that are overhead, or there's vacant land and I don't like what they're building there. They get to object to that, and then they can actually get out of the contract on that. But they can object to it, and then you can object to that off-record title. Most of the time, nobody's going to have any ability. Sometimes it shows up in title, but sometimes it's something you discover in your research, the buyer or you discover in the research. Okay. So now Title resolution deadlines. So if your buyer does have a title objection, then you have 2 days, I would put 2 days after, that this is the deadline that your buyer, you guys have to resolve between that and the seller and the title company. A lot of times it could be a tax lien, it could be somebody, a mechanic's filed something. There are things that'll show up along the way. There could be a, out east, it could be that oil and gas people put something on the property you don't like. So there's things that you might want to object to. Make your dates about a week and a half to 2 weeks out. Follow kind of this guideline and you'll not have any problems. On number 8, where's the third party right to purchase? We don't use that one. The high country normally would use that one. But not down here. We don't have any place that we might use that one. The association deadline is the listing agent's responsibility to get it to you on time. I always make that deadline the same as my title deadline. That way, in my title and tax certificate, that way you don't, everything comes quickly within that first 2 weeks. Your association termination is your buyer's responsibility. Is there something in there that they don't like? If that's the case, they need to terminate that. Okay, hang on just a minute. We have another person. Just a second. Oop, who's waiting? It's Dahlia. Okay. Okay. So what we have here is the association document deadline is again the responsibility of the listing agent. And you again want to make that deadline the same deadline as your title commitment deadline. That way you get your documents quickly. That's in paragraph 7. Your association termination, you want to make the same as your termination for objection of title and off-record title. Make them the same. If you do that, you'll just it's a 3 to 4 day time frame. That way you don't drag anything out, okay? So that's the buyer's responsibility. Say, yes, I'll take the association documents or I won't. And then you can terminate on that. Your seller's property disclosure, this is the responsibility of the listing agent. That has to be given to you. I get that pretty quick so that if there's anything that before you can do your inspection, you want to make sure you've got that particular document. Your lead-based paint, if it applies, will be on the same date. You want it pretty quick. You have an acceptance date down here. I put down like 1/4, and this is, 7 days later, I want these documents or sooner, whatever works within you think is the schedule. But these 2 documents come from the listing agent. Now, let me explain the new loan application deadline. No lender can give you, no loan application can be completed without the legal description and the address of the property. So just because you now have an acceptance on an offer that now becomes a contract, now you will be able to complete your new loan application. I would also strongly suggest that whatever buyer you have, that your buyer goes all the way through even to underwriting, and then they come out of underwriting saying, hey, you got to find a house, get a loan, and then we can lock your rate in. The rates are somewhere between 5 and it's like 5 and 5.25 right now, somewhere in that vicinity. So don't mess around because they're going up weekly. On new loan termination, that means this one you should make somewhere between 3 and 5 days after your acceptance of your contract, because this is, if you read that paragraph, and I encourage you to do it, these are the conditions. So these are the terms and conditions in which the buyer is going to accept. They're going to sign off on it. The buyer and the lender are saying, sure, this is what we're going to get. This is done. Okay, this loan you want is here. This is what you have. Here's your payment. Once you go past this deadline, it's going to be very difficult for you to get your money back for your buyers on terms and conditions. This is no longer a situation where buyers can bail just before closing. They have to go within this 3 to 5 day period. Now, the new loan availability means a loan that the buyer agreed to on their new loan term deadline, is it still available? If the answer is yes, and the buyers choose not to go through with the deal, you may have problems getting your earnest money back. You can't bail. If that program is no longer available, okay, you would get your earnest money back. But if that program is still there, then you're going to have to say, I want my money back, and you're going to have trouble getting it back. Does everybody understand those 3 deadlines? Everybody struggles with this. Anybody got a question on those 3 deadlines? Okay. So items 16 through 21, we do not fill that out and we don't need it here. And remember, you don't have any NAs in your contract. You can take at the very, very bottom below signatures and below where the agent signed, there's a line in CTME, and I think there is one in DocuSign, where you can remove the NAs. All right, now we're going to appraisal. Appraisal is done usually about a week. Oh, let me back up. Your new loan availability deadline is about a week before closing. So if we have any issues, you try to get that resolved before your deadline, so that you can keep going and solve it before your actual day of closing. Your appraisal deadline, you want to put that about a week and a half before closing, so that the lender can get it. Most of them will try to get it earlier, but this is the latest date you want to do. Then you want 2 days for any objections, and you want 2 or 3 days for any resolution. So if you bid on a property that's $525,000 and the appraisal comes in at 500, now you're going to have a fight. So unless you have appraisal gap that will take you to 525, you're probably going to have a fight. So you've got to remember that this is a date that you want to be sure that it's a week and a half to 2 weeks prior to closing. So if you have to battle on something, you have plenty of time to do it. Next thing is your ILC or new survey. If you're putting a contract in on a townhome or a condo, you do not need any dates here. However, if it's a house or acreage, you will. So you want to put in a date that, again, it's pretty quick. You want to get your survey or ILC, and if there's any objections or any resolution. The bottom line here is the companies that order the ILC or survey, unless if you have a lot of land, you need to get a new survey, and then you need to ask the seller to pay for it. Or if they have one, then have them give that to you. You put that into additional provisions. But if you need an ILC, it's determined by the lender and or the title company. Morgan County is the county I hear the most that ILCs are asked for, and lenders ask for up there, because there's a lot of drilling up there. So you put the dates in here if you have a house or a piece of land, and you say who's doing it as you fill it out on paragraph 9. If it's a condo or townhome, you can leave this out. Now, your water right examination deadline. Most people are going to check the box no. However, if you've got acreage, there could be water rights that convey. You have to have a water right attorney examine those rights. And you need to find out, you can see if you can get a name from a title company of a water right attorney or a couple of water right attorneys to find out how long they need to review. The bottom line is that it could take up to several weeks or several months. When you have mineral rights involved in a property, it's the same thing. Most of the time, it's going to be no, because you're in a lot and block. But however, if you're an acreage and there's some mineral rights that show up that they may get, it's going to have to be reviewed by a mineral attorney. Again, we have to get a name and qualify how long it might take if they're going to review. And again, don't make this a short, you got to keep in mind when you have these two items, it could affect your closing date. So make sure you check ahead of time before you write the offer. You want to get your inspections done somewhere within the first week to a week and a half. Now, if your buyers are going to do an inspection and they are going to object, you don't need your termination deadline in here. If your buyers are only going to do an inspection, you leave the termination deadline in there, and then you will not put any dates in your objection and resolution deadline. In other words, if you give an offer that says we're only going to inspect for health and safety items, and we're not going to ask for anything, you only put a termination deadline in here. If you're going to go ahead and put an objection in and a resolution, you can leave all 3 dates in here because that'll be an option for you. But you can only use a termination or objection. You cannot use both. So in other words, if your people do an inspection and they want to object to something, this is the deadline you're going to have it at. Then you resolve, which is somewhere between 2 to 3 or 4 days after the inspection. So is any questions on these 3 dates? Everybody good? So now we have due diligence, delivery date, and we have objections, and we have resolution. If the property that you're making the bid on doesn't have anything such as they finished the basement in the last 3 to 5 years, or there's something in there about a lease on a solar or alarm systems or something like that, you don't need to put your dates in here. If there's something in there that your buyers want information on, it's not going to be the refrigerator warranty or anything of that nature. It's only going to apply to something that's leased or something that has been finished and requires permits for finishing a basement or putting a new roof on or any of those kinds of things, or a new air conditioner or whatever it may be. So now at this point, that if there's nothing in there, you can leave those dates out. But if you're unsure and there's something there you want to check, such as the lease or something of that nature, leave those dates in. Your conditional sale deadline, that paragraph says, hey, we have a house, it's under contract, it's going to close on this specific date. And then you want additional provisions regarding paragraph 10, conditional sale, I think it's 10.7, conditional sale date. And then you put in the contract at 123 Main Street is fully executed. We're only waiting to close. So give the other agent and the seller some information on this conditional sale, okay? Then you have a lead-based paint termination deadline. So up here, we have a deadline that the listing agent is going to give you a lead-based paint right here. So you turn around and you give it back to the seller fully executed, fully signed, and only have 2 to 3 days in between here. Do not do it just before closing. You do it really quick up front. The object of your dates are to get as much of your dates up front as possible. Then you only have to worry about the appraisal and getting your loan availability deadline met. Otherwise, you string these things out, you get confused, and you'll miss a deadline, and it'll cost somebody something. Now we have our deadline for closing. We have our deadline for time. Always put a date and a time for possession. Do not put DOD, do not put delivery of funds, any of the crap like that. Be sure you put a specific time and date. If you close before 5 o'clock, you can do an amend extend, move the closing date up, time up, and everybody sign at closing. Your possession date, if you have a post-closing occupancy, probably should be the date that you're going to put in here and not the day of closing. Okay, I see an error in here, so let me so new loan availability is after closing, so I'm going to have to change that. So you want it a week before closing, week and a half before closing. Who's got questions? This is the quietest group. Who's got questions? Unmute yourself if you're going to talk.
Donna, this is Scott. Can you refresh my memory on an ILC?
ILC is location improvement certificate. And that is usually is a plat map, and it shows where the house is and all your utilities are around that. New home builders give them at closing. Usually on a resale on a house, they don't get it unless the lender or the title company require it.
Thank you.
Yep. Anybody else got a question? Unmute yourself if you do. Wow, come on, guys, no questions? This is an easy group today. All right, think about it, go back and create your buy-sell contract with your dates in there, understand what it is, and next week we'll do listings again. So everybody have a great day.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye.